Arthur, Merlin the Magician, and King Uther Pendragon. It was a time of war in Britain. There was much fighting and killing. There were many small kingdoms in Britain, and each kingdom had its own king. But no king was strong enough to rule all the land. There was no peace in Britain, and the people suffered. Merlin the magician spoke to the people. "One king will come," he said. "All the land will become one kingdom, and one king will rule in one land. There will be peace at last." But who was this king? Perhaps it was King Uther Pendragon, the king of Winchester. Uther was a strong king with a large army. He ruled most of southern Britain. Only the land of Cornwall, to the far west, had a king as powerful as Uther, the king of Cornwall, whose name was Gorlois. King Uther spoke to Merlin the magician. "I will go to Cornwall," said Uther. "I will make peace with King Gorlois. I will marry one of his daughters, and we will have a son. Then our son will be the king of all Britain." Merlin was silent. He looked at King Uther. Uther was short, but he had a strong body. His hair was as black as the feathers of a raven. Uther spoke loudly and roughly. Men were afraid of him because he was always angry. Uther rode a great war horse, and he carried a heavy sword. He could kill a man with one blow of his sword. Merlin was the opposite of Uther. Merlin was tall, but he was not strong. He did not carry a sword. Merlin's hair was as white as the feathers of a swan, but he was not an old man. No one knew where Merlin came from. Some men said that Merlin came out of the west, from across the sea. Merlin spoke quietly and said few words. But everyone listened to him when he spoke, because Merlin was wise and clever. "Tell me, magician," said Uther, "can you look into the future? Can you tell me, will my son be king of all Britain?" Merlin was silent. His eyes were the color of the clear blue sky. He did not look at the king. He looked far away. And there was sadness in Merlin's eyes when he spoke. "Yes, sire," said the magician softly. "Your son will be king of all Britain. But the unmarried daughter of King Gorlois is very young. She is only a child." Uther Pendragon's face became bright with joy. "Bring horses," he shouted to his men. "We will ride to Cornwall." After many days, King Uther came to the land of Cornwall. He rode to Tintagel Castle, where King Gorlois lived with his wife Igraine. The castle was built of black stone and stood on a high cliff above a dark sea. "King Uther, you are welcome," said Gorlois. "Eat and drink. We will be friends." So Uther and Gorlois sat in the castle hall and ate and drank. King Gorlois was an old gray-haired man, but his wife, Igraine, was young and very beautiful. Her hair was the color of gold. As soon as Uther saw Igraine, he looked at no one else. He drank more and more wine, and his face became red. He stared at Queen Igraine, but she would not look at Uther. She lowered her eyes. King Gorlois looked angrily at his guest. "Tell me, lady," said Uther to Igraine, "how many children do you have?" "Three," answered Queen Igraine. "My two older daughters are married. My youngest daughter is 3 years old. Her name is Morgana." Uther drank more wine. "I can give you a son," he said. When King Gorlois heard these words, he stood up and put his hand on his sword. "Uther Pendragon, leave my house now," he shouted, "and never return." Uther stood up slowly. "I will leave," he said to Gorlois, "but I will return with an army." And so King Uther made war against King Gorlois. In October, Uther's army attacked Tintagel Castle, but Uther could not take the castle. It was too strong. Igraine, Queen of Cornwall. "I do not want Tintagel Castle," Uther said to Merlin. I want Queen Igraine. She will be my wife. Winter is coming, and my men have little food. I will take the army back to Winchester, but first I must have Igraine. Help me, Merlin, and I will do anything that you say." "Tell your men to leave," Merlin said. "Tell them to move east, back towards Winchester, but tell them not to go far. They must wait in the woods. King Gorlois will see that your men are leaving. He will come out of the castle and follow your army. Then you will go inside the castle and visit Igraine." "The castle guards will kill me," said Uther. "I will protect you," said Merlin. "I will use magic. I will cast a spell and will change you. For one night I will give you the face and body of Gorlois, but you must do one thing for me." "What do you want?" said Uther Pendragon. "Igraine will have a child," said Merlin, "and you will give that child to me." "Yes," said Uther, "I will give you the child." So Uther gave the orders to his men: "Move away from the castle, move back to the woods." The men walked away to the east, back towards Winchester, but they did not go far. Before night came, Uther's men stopped. They waited in the woods. But Uther did not go with his men. He and Merlin hid in a circle of tall stones and waited. The king and the magician watched the gates of the castle. At last the gates opened. King Gorlois came out with his men, and they followed Uther's army. Merlin spoke words of magic. He cast a spell. Slowly the shape of Uther's face and body changed until he looked like an old grey man. Uther became Gorlois. Uther rode his horse to the gates of Tintagel Castle. "Open the gates," he ordered the guards. "I will go to the queen." Uther Pendragon went to the bedchamber of Queen Igraine. And that night there was a great storm. The wind blew from the sea, and lightning lit the black walls of the castle. The sound of thunder was loud, and the sounds of battle were louder. The armies of Uther and Gorlois were fighting with swords and axes. Igraine cried out as she slept. In the morning, Uther was gone. Igraine went to the eastern walls of the castle and saw her husband's army returning. But Uther's men were behind the army of Gorlois, and they were carrying her husband's body on a shield. King Gorlois was dead. He had been killed in battle, and his body was covered in blood from many wounds. Then Uther entered Tintagel Castle as himself, and Igraine became his wife. Uther stayed at Tintagel Castle until the middle of the next year. On Midsummer's Day, Igraine gave birth to a son, but she did not give her son a name. That night Merlin came to the castle. Uther and Igraine were holding their newborn son. Igraine's daughter Morgana was with them. Merlin did not speak to Uther or Igraine. He took the baby boy and looked at him. "I name you Arthur," he said. "Give me my son," Igraine cried, but Uther remembered his promise and did not stop the magician. Merlin took the boy and went away. Igraine wept all night and all day. Slowly her sadness and pain made her go mad. She ran to the western walls of the castle and threw herself into the sea. Morgana Le Fay and the death of Uther. Uther and his men left the castle. He took Igraine's daughter, Morgana, with him. When he reached the town of Glastonbury, he found a nunnery with high walls. There, holy women, or nuns, lived and never went outside. "Morgana will be a nun," Uther said. "She will stay inside the nunnery walls. No man shall see her face again." Then Uther returned to Winchester. He was now king in the south of Britain. There was a peace in the land for a time, but Uther had many enemies. One enemy, who lived in the north, sent a servant to work in the king's kitchen in Winchester. The servant put poison into Uther's wine. Uther drank the wine and died at the table in the great hall of his castle. Merlin promises a new king. For 15 summers and winters there was no king in the south, and the people suffered because there was no order in the land. Then, one night, Merlin came secretly to Winchester. He came to Winchester Cathedral, a great church in the town, and spoke to the archbishop. "Tell all the people to come to the cathedral on Sunday," he said. On Sunday, the knights and the people of Winchester came to the cathedral. They prayed for peace and a good king. And while they were praying, they heard a sound like music outside the cathedral. The people went outside. In the field by the church, they saw a large stone. The stone was half as big as a man. A bright metal sword was standing in the middle of the stone. The people could see only the handle of the sword. The archbishop looked at the stone and the sword. Words were written on the stone in gold letters. "The man who pulls this sword from the stone is the true king of all Britain." Then, one by one, the men tried to pull the sword from the stone. All the knights of Winchester tried, but they failed. The sword did not move. "The true king is not here today," said the archbishop. "I will send messengers through all the lands of Britain. Soon everyone will know about this sword. Anyone who wants to pull the sword out of the stone must come here at Christmas. On New Year's Day we will have a contest. We will see who can draw the sword from the stone."